The Pilot Connection, 6333 Pacific Avenue, Suite 334, Stockton, California, 95207. That's 6333 Pacific Avenue, Suite 334, Stockton, California, 95207. Telephone number 209-957-5493. That's 209-957-5493. Stay tuned, folks. We've got to take a little break. I'll be right back after this very short pause. Don't look around. No, don't do that. You may find that the universe is laughing at you. Earlier, folks, I said that even non-citizens can quit paying income taxes legally. You see, further review of 26 Code of Federal Regulations 1.1441-5 reveals that for the purposes of income taxes, non-resident aliens can file IRS Form 1078 and make an election to be treated as a resident. So who is required to file and pay income taxes? Only certain manufacturers of products such as cigars, petroleum, etc. are actually required by the law to file and pay taxes pursuant to the Internal Revenue Code. You see, it's just so simple. Doesn't it really make you feel dumb? Well, don't feel lonely, because it made me feel dumb too. Remember, I told you that at one point in my life I had to go stand in front of the bathroom mirror and say, Bill, you've been stupid all your life. Don't do it anymore. And that's what you all need to do too. Believe me, it doesn't hurt as much as you think it does. It doesn't, really. It doesn't hurt me to tell you that I was stupid for most of my life. But most people won't admit that. They think it hurts. So they continue being stupid. They continue being sheeple instead of people. And as sheep always do, they continue to be fleeced on a regular basis, and eventually they're led to the slaughter. All sheep, folks, are eventually fleeced and then led to the slaughter. Is that what you want to happen to you? Each year, when the IRS sends out 1040 instruction booklets, there is contained in the booklet Privacy Act Notice 609, which says this, and you all get that book, but none of you ever read it. It says, quote, "Our legal right to ask for information is Internal Revenue Code sections 6001, 6011, and 6012A, and their regulations," unquote. According to the IRS, this is their authority to compel an individual to file and pay an income tax. Not true. And this is one of the clear, very clear, crystal clear instances where they are operating under the color of law, because they know that most, if not all, citizens will never go read those code sections, but will just take their word for it. And that's illegal. In fact, it's a felony to operate under the color of law. 26 United States Code 6001 says this: "It is the notice or regulations requiring record statements and special returns." Quote, "Every person liable for any tax imposed by this title or for the collection thereof shall keep such records, render such statements, etc." Unquote. Now, there are two things to consider when reading this provision of the law. Number one, this section does not specifically refer to a Form 1040 income tax return anywhere. It only refers to a, quote, "special return," unquote, which does not apply to you unless you are dealing in alcoholic beverages or firearms, in which case you would be required to file an annual special tax registration and return, which is the only, quote, "special," unquote, return referred to in the entire Internal Revenue code. And remember I told you, the law must specifically designate and spell out who and what is required and exactly which form is required by who. Reason number 2. This section states, quote, every person liable, unquote, but it never establishes who is liable for any kind of, quote, income, unquote, tax. And the law must designate exactly who is required in every case where any law is ever passed. 26 United States Code, section 6011, is the general requirement of return, statement, or list. Quote, A, which is the section cited. General rule. When required by regulations prescribed by the Secretary, any person made liable for any tax imposed by this title or for the collection thereof shall make a return or statement according to the forms, unquote. This section uses the same terminology, quote, any person made liable, unquote, without ever saying who specifically is made liable. The last section quoted by the IRS's Privacy Act Notice 609 is 26 United States Code 6012. 26 United States Code 6012 is persons required to make returns of income. Quote, A, general rule, returns with respect to income taxes under Subtitle A shall be made by the following. 1A, every individual having for the taxable year gross income which equals or exceeds the exemption amount except that a return shall not be required of an individual, unquote. The only problem here, you see, is that there is no statute within Subtitle A which makes a person liable for an income tax that a return could be filed for under Section 6012. The key words here are, quote, with respect to income taxes under Subtitle A, unquote. When you go back to Subtitle A, it does not specify who or what. This has been the greatest mystery to patriots, United States attorneys, judges, etc. in the history of the federal income tax. Now just where is the law which makes anyone liable for an income tax? If you can locate one, not only would the Pilot Connection Society and William Cooper and the Citizens Agency for Joint Intelligence be interested in it, but so would the IRS. I can guarantee you. We have a letter from Senator Daniel Inouye which states that according to the Congressional Research Service, there is no law which specifically and unequivocally requires anyone to pay income tax. And you can get a copy of that letter simply by writing the Pilot Connection. I think it costs a couple of bucks. They'll be happy to send it to you. Send them a self-addressed stamped envelope and $2 and tell them you want to see that letter. There are numerous provisions of the law which impose a tax and make someone liable. And here are a few which you should consider. The tax imposed is in Section 5001, and it is specifically a tax on alcohol. Who is liable? Well, in Section 5005, it says the distiller is liable. In Section 5701, it specifically says there's a tax on cigars. In Section 5703, it specifically states that the manufacturer of the cigars is liable. In Section 1, the tax imposed is a taxable income. But there is no section and no code showing who is liable when the law must specifically state who is liable for exactly what legislation, tax, or law. Now, folks, there are other imposed taxes. Just look up the various types of taxes in subtitles B, D, and E, and you can continue listing them as in the example which you just heard. Trying to understand the tax laws can sometimes be a very difficult task. But if you just read it and go to the sections referred and read those sections and use Black's Law Dictionary to define the terms, and also turn to the section in the IRS code where they specifically assign different definitions to words, because that is important, where they use a different meaning of a word not specifically recognized in the law, then they must set up a dictionary within the law explaining the meanings of those words that they've changed the meanings of. It's not hard, folks, like everybody thinks, but they keep telling you that it's hard. You keep hearing all of these things. On November 30th, 1984 in Baltimore, Roscoe Egger Jr., Commissioner of the IRS, stated this, and they're always doing this to discourage you from actually reading the code. Quote, any tax practitioner, any tax administrator, any taxpayer who has worked with the Internal Revenue Code knows that it is probably the biggest mishmash of statutes imaginable. Congress, various administrations, and all the special interest groups have tinkered with it over the years, and now a huge assortment of special interest and pet economic theories have been woven into the great hodgepodge that is today's Internal Revenue Code. Unquote. And you can find that in Internal Revenue publication 84-123, 11/30/84. That's the date, the last three numbers, 11/30/84. They're always issuing these statements. It discourages you from even looking at the code. Well, the code's very simple to understand, and most of it you don't even have to deal with if you just deal with the part of the law that we've already discussed. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. That's why we tell you to go to the experts, the pilot connection. Write this down. The pilot connection. 6333 Pacific Avenue, Suite 334, Stockton, California, 95207. That's the pilot connection. 6333 Pacific Avenue, Suite 334, Stockton, California, 95207. Their phone number is area code 209-957-5493. That's 209-957-5493. And did you guys that are resident aliens, or non-resident aliens, I should say, you guys that are non-resident aliens, men and women, doesn't matter, remember that you can file IRS Form 1078 and make an election to be treated as a resident and quit paying income taxes legally. How do you like that, folks? I just love it. I just absolutely love it. Now, it is true that the Internal Revenue Code is replete. Well, let me go back for a minute before I continue on. The reason that non-citizens, non-resident aliens can file IRS Form 1078 and make election to be treated as a resident is because the law that I read you last Wednesday. Remember that? It's the one that made the freed slaves after the Civil War citizens of the United States of America. And to make them citizens, they had to give everybody the rights of citizens who were in this country. Didn't make any difference who they were or where they were from. That's why I read you that law, so that you would then understand what you were going to hear tonight. Now let me continue. It is true. The Internal Revenue Code is replete with contradictions and dichotomies, and it's written that way on purpose to intentionally confuse if you get that far into it, but you really don't even have to go that far into it. However, I hope that you'll agree that the Pilot Connection Society has been able to wade through all the mishmash and structure its programs solely upon the provisions of the law, which are solid and not open to wide interpretation. The provisions of the law discussed during this program make up only a fraction, folks, of the research utilized by the Pilot Connection Society.